Last year's high school recruiting class had a lot of hype, and I really mean that, but when you look back, a lot of the players aren't in the situation we thought they would be in. So today, I want to see where the top 10 recruits from a year ago are right now. This should be a lot of fun, so let's get into this. Starting it off with the 10th recruit in the country, we've got none other than Kennedy Chandler. The point guard dominated high school on his way to becoming a top 10 recruit. Now, Chandler had a big obstacle in his way when it came to the NBA. He's tiny, standing at just 6 feet tall, but going into the year, most mocks still had him as a one-and-done prospect. He managed to put together a solid year, showing off his well-rounded game, averaging 14 points and 5 assists, shooting 46% from the field and 38% from 3. I really don't think it's a question. If he was standing at even 6'3", he would have been going early in Thursday's draft, but ultimately, he ended up slipping into the second round, going to the Spurs with the 38th overall pick. 9 is an interesting one, and that's Michael Foster. The 6'8" forward had a lot of excitement coming out of high school, and rightfully so. At a top program in the country, Hillcrest Prep, he managed to average 32 points and 18 rebounds. He had his choice of practically any Division I program, but ultimately decided to take the newly popular route and go to the G League Ignite. Before the year, it seemed like he was a lock to hear his name called on draft night, and for the most part, he had a pretty solid season. He averaged 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game, but while his numbers were solid, there was a couple of glaring problems that came up in his game that scouts just couldn't ignore when it comes to the NBA draft. He didn't have the athleticism to project as an elite defender at the next level, which comboed with his lacking offensive skill set made it tough for teams to take the chance on him. Because of this, he fell all the way out of the draft. But his story isn't over. Unlike a lot of the undrafted players from this draft, he was able to sign a rookie deal with the 76ers, and honestly, I would be excited if I was a Philly fan, as this just seems like an all-upside scenario, especially considering I have a feeling that the G League draft prospects might be going severely undervalued, which we're going to get to in a little bit. 8 was 6'8" small forward Caleb Houston. Coming out of high school and heading to Michigan, every mock had him as a lottery selection. And for good reason, 6'8", 7-foot wingspan, solid athlete. But it was his shooting beyond the perimeter that really carried his preseason draft stock. Sadly though, it was a pretty disappointing year. He averaged just 10 points and 4 rebounds, shooting 38% from the field. Now, he ended up being an okay shooter, shooting 36% from 3, but that wasn't close to enough for him to hold on to the draft stock he had before the year. I really thought he should have stayed another season. I could have easily seen a Johnny Davis level breakout as a sophomore, but he decided to go to the draft where he was still getting some buzz for the first round, but he ended up landing with the Magic with the very first pick in the second round. If he can get back on track with the player we thought he'd be coming out of high school, man would the Magic be something scary with how perfect he fits into this group. Next, we've got the 7th overall ranked player in the country, and once number 1 ranked player in the country before reclassifying, Jalen Duren. Duren came out of high school expected to go early in the draft. He was a man amongst boys, but still one of the youngest players in the entire class. He was an interior force, but yet flashed enough skill to get excited about his development. Aside from the guys that ended up going at the very top of the draft, I think he was the closest thing to exactly what we expected this year. He averaged 12 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks, showing off his athleticism on both ends. He went to the draft where he selected with the 13th pick, and after a trade, ended up joining Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, and the Detroit Pistons. We've seen a lot of rumors that the Pistons want to go after DeAndre Ayton, but honestly, considering the money they would have to give him and the position that they're in, I really think it's in their best interest just to give Duren a proper chance. The 6th overall recruit in the country was none other than Jabari Smith. Now, coming out of high school, he was getting some solid attention for the draft, but the expectations just didn't seem to be too high. We knew he had a great 6'10" frame, he was well coordinated, a solid shooter, and wouldn't be a liability on either end, but he came into the year with most mocks having him in that 7 to 10 range. I think it's safe to say he blew away most every expectation. He quickly shot up the board and became the early favorite to be the number 1 pick in the draft. This year at Auburn, he averaged 17 points and 7 rebounds, but what really had everyone excited was his 42% from 3 on almost 6 attempts a game. For almost the entire draft process, it looked like the Magic were going to take him at number 1, but last minute they switched course and he ended up falling to the 3rd overall pick in the hands of the Houston Rockets. I've been extremely high on Smith since the very beginning of the college basketball season. He was my top prospect in the draft, and it really burned to see the Thunder pass on him. The concerns I started to see creep up in recent weeks were about his ability as a shot creator, especially tagging the basket. Yes, he's not a bulletproof prospect, but who was? Paolo has to play some defense. Chet is 95 pounds soaking wet. In terms of a prospect that's this solid on both ends, that's this solid of an athlete, I would much rather know that high volume, elite shooting ability is there and count on the attacking to come than vice versa. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm not trying to say that any team at the top of the draft made a mistake. I just don't think you can find a much better prospect that balances risk and reward in the modern game. I'm rambling. Let's get to the 5th ranked player in the country, Patrick Baldwin Jr. Now this is an interesting one. There was a time when Baldwin was the number 1 ranked prospect in the country. Yes, number 1. It was hard not to be excited. He was 6'10", making high schoolers look like toddlers, dominating with his wing skill set in isolation. Now, he ended up suffering an ankle injury at the start of his senior season, which saw him take a hit to his ranking, but he still had the choice of practically any top Division I program. he ended up deciding to go to a tiny program in Milwaukee solely due to his father being appointed the head coach. He came into the year mocked almost everywhere as a mid-lottery selection, but sadly, it wasn't pretty this season. He averaged 12 points and 6 rebounds, but shot an atrocious 34% from the field and 27% from 3. Now 27% is bad, but it's even worse considering he was jacking up 6 attempts a game. With that level of non-production and almost no athleticism to speak of, and I really mean that, he posted a 26-inch vertical at the combine. I've never measured my vertical before, but I feel like I could have put up something better than that. No surprise, he fell down the board drastically. I thought he was going to go in the second round, but on draft night, the Warriors decided to take the chance on the once #1 ranked recruit and take Baldwin with the 28th pick. There isn't a team I trust more than the Warriors when it comes to developing talent. Maybe with another year removed from this ankle injury, he can get back on track. With reports that Wiseman, Kuminga, and Moody are all going to be playing in the Summer League, this should be a fun roster to watch in just over a week. Then we've got the 4th ranked player, Mr. Paolo Bruno. Despite being ranked here at 4, he came out of high school expected to be the #1 pick in the draft, with him standing at a physically imposing 6'10", 250-pound frame and a point forward skill set. This year at Duke, for the most part, he was the player we expected. He averaged 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists a game. And as we talked about with Jabari, for most of the process, it looked like he was going to be going 3rd overall, but last minute, the Magic changed their mind, and he went where we all thought he would go a year ago, #1. Now, the 3rd overall prospect is a really interesting one, especially with how many comments I've received about him, and that's Amani Bates. I see the comments all the time. Where is Amani Bates? Is Amani Bates in this class? Well, let's talk about it. The hype for Bates a few years ago was crazy. At the start of high school, everyone was talking about how we need to get ready for Amani Bates, the next Kevin Durant. Now, I'm not going to lie, I was getting excited. It was hard not to if you ever caught his highlights. As a sophomore, the 6'9" wing was averaging 32 points and 9 rebounds. I hadn't seen a prospect that young, that size, with that level of offensive skill in a very long time. He was ranked the 7th overall player in his class, but after his junior season, he decided to leave high school early and reclassify to this class, where obviously he became the 3rd overall recruit. Despite once being committed to Michigan State, he decided to join another top recruit that just reclassified as well, Jalen Duren, and go to Memphis. Now, unlike Duren, it came out that despite going to college early, Bates wasn't going to be eligible for the 2022 draft, but that didn't stop the hype from rolling in. Now, sadly, he was no Kevin Durant this year. Do me a favor and just go back and take a look at how crazy Durant's numbers were when he was a freshman at Texas. Bates averaged 10 points and 3 rebounds, shooting 39% from the field and 33% from 3. Not great. Now, this season was also filled with a lot of mystery when it came to Bates. In February, he decided to step away from the team, but we got mixed reports on why. Some saying it was because he was leaving Memphis, others because it was a back injury. Ultimately, he ended up going into the transfer portal, but is yet to commit to a new school. Right now, reports are suggesting that Louisville and Eastern Michigan are the favorites, but there's still a chance he returns back to Memphis. Now, you'll probably see if you've taken a look at mocks for next year, Bates is nowhere to be seen. Right now, he's one of the biggest mysteries in college basketball. Where is he going? Are you going to see the player that was deemed the next Kevin Durant when he takes the court? Is there an actual back injury? These are questions that have to be answered before we can get an idea of his future. He's not a great athlete. He's got T-Rex arms. He's going to have to produce on the court to go early in next year's draft. But there's been very few high school prospects that impressed me more than Bates, so hopefully he can get back on track. Now we get to the 2nd overall recruit in the country, where we see the biggest fall from stardom since probably Trayvon Duval, and that's Jaden Hardy. In almost every aspect, he was looked at as the next Anthony Edwards coming out of high school. He had a built, NBA-ready, 6'4" frame with a 6'9" wingspan. He was a great athlete, but it was all this comboed with his ability as a shot creator that had him looked at as an absolute lock to be a top 5 selection, in most cases a top 3 pick in the 2022 draft. He decided to go to the G League, and almost everyone was expecting a Jalen Green-esque season. Well, that's not what we got. He averaged 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. Looks good on paper, but he shot just 35% from the field and 27% from 3. That's just not going to cut it. Scouts ripped into his shot selection and defensive mistakes, sending him flying down the board. I still thought there was a chance he would go in the 1st round, but ended up falling all the way to the 37th pick, where he was traded to the Dallas Mavericks. I love this decision by the Mavericks. As we talked about with Michael Foster, the G League might be disguising some serious talent. Yes, Jalen Green had no problem transitioning from high school to the pro level, but that's not an easy thing to do. We even saw Kuminga really struggle offensively, but scouts gave him a lot of slack given the other aspects of his game. I really think things could have been a lot different if guys like Foster or Hardy decided to go the college route. I guess we'll see, but I've got a strong feeling Hardy will prove to be much better than a 2nd round level player. Then lastly, we've got the #1 recruit in the class, 7'1" twig, Chet Holmgren. Holmgren was fun to watch in high school. You don't see a 7-footer taking the ball coast to coast, pulling up from 3 very often. But it was unclear what player we were going to be getting at the college level, especially going to a top program like Gonzaga. While he showed off that flashy skill set every once in a while, it was his elite rim protecting and perimeter shooting that really made him a top pick in the draft. He ended up going number 2 overall to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think I made it very clear that as a Thunder fan, I wanted Smith, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm excited to see what Chet can do, especially playing alongside a young backcourt like Josh Giddey and SGA. So there it is. What an interesting class. You've got guys that went undrafted, top prospects that were what's projected to be top 5 picks flying down the board, guys that exceeded expectations, and some that are still mysteries. I had a lot of fun making this video. If you guys want to see another, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, tell me in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.